From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on May 12th, 2025 from South Carolina Public Radio studios here in Columbia. And a programming note to start you off with. Due to several scheduling issues this week, we will be precluded from delivering you and producing you a Saturday podcast episode. Blame Ken Burns. Nevertheless, we will return next Tuesday, so just one for this week. Ken Burns, he won this week. Also, another programming note. Okay, unrelated to Ken Burns. We will be hosting a live taping event in Aiken at Good Girl Brewing on June 12th at 6 p.m. Mark your calendars. I will be there with reporter Mayan Schechter and special guest, Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey.
Awesome.
So put that on your calendar now, June 12th at 6 p.m., Good Girl Brewing in Aiken. We'll have an invitation online soon. Now, on this episode of The Lead, we continue our legislative session debrief with two big House names. Education and Public Works Committee Chairwoman Shannon Erickson, who is a Beaufort Republican, and Richland County Democrat Representative Jermaine Johnson. We discuss big legislative accomplishments and the politics of the 2025 legislative session and what these lawmakers want to see when they return next January. Something I would like to see before next January is just a call from y'all to share your memories of the Emanuel 9. It's been 10 years this June, and we want to make sure that their legacy lives on. That's why SCETV is asking you to take part in Voices Collected. Your voice, your memory, your experience, it matters. Visit scetv.org/Emanuel9 and help us honor the past while building a stronger, more connected South Carolina. And like I said there before, folks, if you go to that website, scetv.org/Emanuel9, you can fill out a form online that will let us know if you're willing to share your story about those that we lost that day. Now, I know that was a lot of housekeeping for the beginning of the podcast, and we appreciate you sticking through it. So now our final request, give us a shout, 803-563-7169. We want to hear from you guys. Give us some topics to talk about in the wind down section. We love hearing from you at 803-563-7169. Let's look at what's on tap this week for your schedules in the State House. Well, they have adjourned a sine die, so nothing going on at the State House, but we expect House lawmakers to return on May 28th to approve a new budget and any potential vetoes. So put that on your calendar now, May 28th for the House. So far, Governor Henry McMaster will be joined by state and local emergency management officials for a media briefing on Thursday, May 15th to discuss the state's preparation for the 2025 hurricane season begins June 1st. And on the economic calendar, we get new CPI inflation numbers for April on Tuesday. And Fed Chair Jerome Powell speaks Thursday. And we also get April retail sales data that day as well. EconPod. But we continue our look at the end of the 2025 legislative session. It was so fast. We did all that work in the lead up. Now we're in the wilderness of the off session. Now, the friends we've made along the way and those we've left behind, well, we'll see them in the 2026 session, which begins January 13th. But our last episode featured four of our go-to State House reporters recapping a variety of the top issues from the past session. It was a roundtable roundup, if you will. Now, I wanted to start with them first to give you all a good overview of what happened, and now we can dig in on a few other Republican and Democratic perspectives, which is what we'll do in this pod.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Now, the morning of last Thursday, sine die, I spoke with two well-known House lawmakers. Beaufort Republican Representative Shannon Erickson, who is the chair of the Education and Public Works Committee, and Hopkins Democratic Representative Jermaine Johnson, who has had a few viral moments this past session that could just help him in a party that has experienced major electoral defeat, is seeking to reimagine itself and its ability to break through the noise. But let's start with Chairwoman Erickson. When I asked her on This Week in South Carolina about the new school voucher bill that has been signed into law that she helped get through this session, among other big wins.
Education Scholarship Trust Fund, the premise was not sending money to private schools, but sending money to children. It's those eligible children that really was the key factor. And that's what we heard from the Supreme Court in our last decision, that gave us the roadmap to say, all right, we didn't specify strongly enough that the funds went to the child, and we set up an actual trustee, someone who's not related to housed in a government entity. This would be someone who would be contracted with to be that trustee. The funds go to the child. It sits in an account. It ceases to be public money when the child receives the money in their account. That trustee would oversee the expenditures of that. Now, how does the trigger of the money flow? The parent fills out the application. They are either eligible or not eligible. And when the money comes to the child, they have up to, in our bill, $7,500 to be able to choose from a laundry list of educational opportunities that help that specific child. And that's really, I believe, what kind of captured the hearts and minds of the people that we've been working with on this school choice option. You can just do tutoring if that's what your child needs. You could actually transfer to another public school. Some of them charge fees if you're not in their district. You could use those funds to pay those fees. You can use it for a school, but they all have to have norm reference testing. There's certain parameters, and all of that laundry list, all of those vendors, they have to go through an entire process of being approved to be a vendor. So there's accountability on both sides.
Yeah, so a major win for Republicans. The governor signed this bill into law as well. And so this will originally start with 15,000 students that qualify, and then you said $7,500 per student. So when we talk about that money, where's that money coming from? I know the Senate originally talked about using education lottery funds. This bill made it a little bit more open-ended on how you guys can allocate money.
Well, the good news is when we started this, 4 years ago, the House set aside funding with Department of Education in as they needed it, and so there's money sitting there. We actually have funds there, and we had allocated in our budgets for the next few cycles, a penciled in mark of, okay, we've made this commitment. So it does not draw any education funding from our typical education funding sources. This is new revenue. This is revenue that comes directly to this stream.
But isn't that tax dollars?
It's people's money. It's the parents' money. Tax dollars belong to the people of the state. So there is no government money. It goes into the child's account. The child is a citizen. We do the same thing with our scholarships for higher education. They go to any college a child wants to go to if they meet the criteria, and we even do it with our 4-year-olds. And we had the bookends. We didn't have the middle. So now we have the middle.
And when we talk about this funding, are there any concerns from the districts, the school districts, that there might be some loss of funding or any situations like that because of this?
They actually brought to the table deep concerns about it originally back. I believe that we have assuaged some of those by setting up the trustee and setting up the other funding stream. Now, anytime in education, and I've been in education a long time, you have silos. I mean, we have push and pull between every type of education you can have because there are finite dollars in the world. I mean, it's competition. But if we want to fund every child and have that child get the best, then we've got to give options. We're seeing that, especially with the ability for the families to choose something that fits best for them, the child's happier, the family's happier, and we get better results. Even if that's a public choice. It's public, private, faith-based, as long as they are eligible, and that's part of the piece. They have to, have that accountability, and some folks may not want to do that. We did limit it this year to be only nonprofits.
Okay.
So there are no for-profit programs getting funding in this.
And you think there's sufficient oversight when it comes to
they're required to have random audits, at least one per year, all of them, all of our vendors.
And will we pivot to another major win for y'all this year, to one of those on your sheet, the Educator Assistance Act? This is something you've been working hard for years, and another big priority for y'all. It also enjoyed a lot of support, bipartisan, unanimous support, I believe. Tell us about this bill, soon to be a law, what it means for teachers.
The governor signed it yesterday.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I got to get a shout out to our governor. He said early on in his administration that he was going to work on education and support teachers, and he is doing that. It is an honor to work with him, and how quickly he signed those bills is a good indicator of the priority that he sets for our state in that. So, so the Senate picked up the school choice piece as their first piece of legislation. The House picked up the Educator Assistance Act as its first piece of legislation. We'd only passed it 4 times before, so what was one more? And each iteration, you have more collaborators, you have more people come to the table, but this was literally everybody working together saying, how do we get rid of red tape? How can we help our teachers not feel inundated with this every 5-year recertification, which we do to no other profession? You get your certification now, you keep it, you do your professional development, and that counts toward your recertification, and you don't have to fill all that paperwork out again. We worked on contracts because we were asking teachers to sign contracts for a whole year of work without any details. Not schools, not age of children, not even salary.
Oh.
And I don't know many people who would go to work and do that. I'm blessed to have been around great educators my whole life, and they do it because it's a calling, not because they're waiting for on that bottom line. But they still should be treated respectfully and as professionals. And I don't think there are many professions that we'd see signing a blank contract and saying, yeah, I'll step in and fill your space for you and do a good job. Exactly when do you think you might tell me what it is I'm going to make?
When and where, yeah.
That's, I think that part of it. We also took out, the law required that if there were any action of loss of certification, that it had to be at least a year. I mean, it required that. We've now given them flexibility on that, so that if there's an issue, the circumstances can match and not be an arbitrary number. We also have given a ability, teachers, silly, really, crazy, that they could not resign due to some kind of family emergency or even a move of their family. They would quite literally lose their certification if they broke the contract for any reason.
Wow.
So now they have the ability to submit, my husband, my spouse, my wife, somebody has a job move, or I have a parent that I need to care for, something, and they can then leave that certification. Again, it's treating those folks like true professionals.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud that we've gotten that done.
And when you talk about this, you see this as a way to boost recruitment and retention as
Absolutely.
well? Because I feel like we're always talking about teacher salaries, which you can bring up in a moment, but this is just going to be one more, I guess, tool in the toolbox to keep people.
It's entirely that. When the state did its teacher recruitment and retention task force, and we put so many people in a room, dynamic leaders in education, run by our late and dearly departed Barbara Nielsen, who did just the lion's share of work. One of those things was these barriers that push teachers out of the classroom or keep them out of the classroom. And we're kind of taking that as a little bit of a roadmap and some check marks on those. Teachers also asked for a leave bank. They accrue leave, sick time, and most of them don't use it and they lose it. Now they can donate it and put it into a fund where those people who they're working side by side need it, can use it, and it's voluntary. It's not mandatory, but that's one of the things that came from the discussions.
Like state
with the
employees
teachers.
have that too, yeah. So
exactly.
But when we talk about the salaries, what is it looking like for starting teacher pay and also step increases in the budget as it stands right now?
Right now, I think everyone will see an increase. The next increment in our starting teacher to the road to 50,000 will be at 48.5. We've worked together with Chairman Bannister, and I'm almost as certain as I could be that we'll see the next step in that next session next year.
Right.
So yeah, I think we're there. And everyone else will be receiving a pay increase as well. That's something I don't think you'll see us letting our foot up on the gas. As you said, salaries are not honestly, they're not the number one thing teachers want. You know what they're loving? Not having cell phones in their classrooms.
I bet, yeah. That's
probably one of the biggest things we've heard for teachers in the classroom. Engagement and behavior.
When we talk about that funding, I mean, $50,000 has been a mark that the governor said. You see that? I think you said keep going on the gas with that. I mean, that's where you want to get. Just keep going.
There.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, we need to not let that become something that gets stagnant, and I think we had. We'd also had a bad practice of putting it into a district and letting districts decide. Now we're actually telling them that these are specifically for salaries.
What do you want to see happen next year? What are some of your legislative focuses for next year that didn't get done this year? You have a whole list. Let's pick one.
Well, I've got special stuff I'm working on. Special education is probably one of them. We need to really help our teachers and retain and recruit more. High school league They've promised to sit down and work with us, and I'm going to hold their feet to the fire and ask them to do that. They've got to be more accountable, and I'd like to see the students higher on the list of how to work on things than programs. And I'm hopeful. I've also got a charter school reform that I'm working on. I've got a legislative audit coming from LAC that I want to see. I know Senator Hembree's been working on his. I don't have it yet, so we're going to start that process as well. On the other side of my committee, we'll be doing some DOT modernization, I hope.
Right, the public works aspect of it.
Public
When we
works
talk
aspect,
about your
yeah.
committee within 30 seconds, there's a lot of different personalities, both in the committee, in the chamber, in the State House. How do you work together across parties and also internally to get things done? 30 seconds.
It's been fantastic. We have people from all over the state. So you get a lot of varied personalities, but perspective. And all of them have different jobs in a variety of educational backgrounds. And really, truly, I thought, oh my gosh, how are we going to mesh this? We've meshed because they're open and honest, and the respect and dialogue that we have had, we've had civil discourse. And we can prove that that can happen. We can disagree and still get along, still work on a product, and make it as good as we can do. And I am so proud of our team. I hope I've thanked all of them. I've tried to thank all of them this year. Been one of the most dynamic, hardworking groups of people I've ever been honored to work with.
That was House Education and Public Works Committee Chairwoman Shannon Erickson, who is a Beaufort Republican. Now, Jermaine Johnson, a 39-year-old Richland County Democrat who has served in the House since 2021. And his clear and firm speeches from the well on a variety of controversial social topics to funding debates over earmarks last week have helped him break out among the 36-member House Democratic Caucus. This exposure could also come in handy if he seeks a run for higher office, which we can add that possibility to pretty much anyone ahead of a statewide election year. But change my mind, folks, change my mind. But here is Representative Johnson talking about his concern about the school choice bill that he vocally opposed earlier this session.
Well, the main issue that I had with it is that it's been deemed unconstitutional time and time again. And it's like we haven't learned our lesson. It's like, you touch something hot and then you realize it was hot and then you got to spank it for it and then you go back and say, well, let me see if it's hot and I'll get the same reaction this time, and you do it again. And we haven't learned our lesson. It continues to come back and back and back, and we continue to fight the same fight. And I don't understand why we can't understand what's going on and what the Supreme Court is going to rule on this. I had some issues when it came to the transportation parts, but we also have to look at individuals who are in these rural communities, in these rural counties that don't have access to private schools or things like that to use the benefits of this voucher program. So if there's no private school within 50 to 100 miles for them to get to one of these schools, how are they going to take advantage of these opportunities? So we have to look at who this is really serving and what the purpose of it is for.
And when you talk about who it's really serving, do you think it's not getting to the people that folks are saying it should be going to, these people who maybe don't have the best public schools, want to have a different opportunity to go to a private school?
Right. So I made that argument on the floor. It was about, well, how are my kids down in Gadsden, South Carolina, going to get to a Heathwood Hall or a Hammond? How are they going to get to these schools? How are these kids in Chester going to get to these locations if there's no private school in their area? How are they really going to benefit from it? So that was one of the amendments that I even offered up, was to change the amount allocated for transportation purposes. And now what they're saying is, okay, we'll allow you to use a little bit more money for the transportation purposes, but you have to hire a driver service, or you have to get a private, company to go ahead and do that. Well, now you're right back at square one, because who are you going to trust with your children anyways to drive them 100 miles every day to school, and you're not seeing them. So there are plenty of issues that we have with this program. It's also not serving the differently able individuals, because these schools can now say, we don't want to take them. We're just going to take just the ones who are the least problematic. We have to serve the least of these, just like all of our public schools do.
And then you're talking about the constitutionality of this all. Do you think that, this is going back to the Supreme Court, proponents of this bill, this law, are now saying that it will pass the Supreme Court muster, the constitutional prohibition against sending public dollars to private education. Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think we might be back here next year in session trying to to get around the Supreme Court again?
Only time will tell on this situation. We have different administration. We've got, different dynamics, all the way across the United States right now. Different opinions are coming up. People are changing their minds on certain things. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know where we're going to be at. But all I know is the best predictor of future is, past.
Yeah.
And what we have seen is been unconstitutional. So if they continue on with the same line of reasoning, we'll be right back here next year arguing about the same thing.
Yeah, and it could eventually at some point go before the voters and change the Constitution that way, but that remains to be seen. I'm sure that's the last effort there. But talking about other things that you were kind of outspoken for this session was that anti-DEI bill, diversity, equity, and inclusion bill, that made it out of the House in early April. It's stuck in the Senate Judiciary Committee, hasn't gone anywhere over in the Senate. But this bill used similar language to President Donald Trump's executive orders involving DEI. The bill doesn't actually seem to do too much. It seems like it's just trying to uphold current anti-discrimination federal laws there, but it prohibits schools and state employees from being forced to take DEI training. So what was your message on this legislation on the floor?
Well, my question to the voters and to my colleagues was, which part of diversity don't you like? Which part of equity don't you like? Which definition don't you like? Was it inclusion? Which one was oppressing you in this situation? And I spoke about that. And the main issue that I had is that when it was first introduced, we saw how bad it was for the state of South Carolina. We saw the report that came out that it was going to cost the state and taxpayers $86 million to implement something that was not a problem. I mean, was diversity, equity, inclusion a problem when we got Volvo here? Was it a problem when we got Boeing here? Was it a problem when we got Scout and we invested in Scout Motors? When did this all of a sudden become a problem for the people of South Carolina? Now all of a sudden we have a new administration in the White House. Now all of a sudden it's a problem. And that was my issue going along with this entire bill, was they tried to sneak it through. It was so bad for everybody in South Carolina. I mean, it was so bad that, we have domestic violence shelters in this state. That bill, if it would have passed the way it was currently written, would have allowed men to go inside those domestic violence shelters. I mean, it was so bad. It would have stopped people from doing, DHEC from doing research on prostate cancer or doing things like that. We had to really take a look at that thing. And when I shined a lot of light on the issues and the problems of that thing, they decided to say, well, let's take a different look. And then they rewrote it, and then they did another look at it and rewrote it again. And now that's landed us to where we have today.
So just kind of almost just doing something to do something, even though it's almost making more problems than it's worth.
I mean, that's what we do here in South Carolina. We have solutions in search of a problem. And when we don't have a problem, we want to fix things that aren't necessarily broken, because we have been, one of the best economic drivers, in this country has been in South Carolina. BMW. I mean, all these companies they're coming here. They want to come here. They're spreading their roots here. But all of a sudden, we have a new administration. Everything is all of a sudden a problem.
So in that vein there, Representative Johnson, a lot of similar arguments you had made on this bill, this anti-DEI bill, was also a lot that we heard when you all were talking about critical race theory, and that was the big thing a year or two ago. Now this DEI stuff was a big issue. And again, CRT was never taught in K through 12 schools in the state. That was something that really kind of got spun up and I think lost in the conversation. But what do you think will be the next big issue? It seems like we're talking about all these things and, like you're saying, solutions in search of problems here. We have a 2-year session this year, it's done, but we're back in 2026 in January. What do you think is going to be the next big social issue you all have to combat?
Well, I love this question because we in South Carolina like to create boogeymen. I mean, at one point, pregnant women were the boogeyman. CRT, like you said, was the boogeyman. DEI was the boogeyman. LGBTQ people, they're the boogeymen. Every session we have a different boogeyman. So only time will tell what the boogeyman is going to become in the next session that we're going to be coming up. But there has to be some sort of a boogeyman. We have some gubernatorial candidates right now that are talking about their boogeymen instead of they're fighting against certain things and that type of stuff. And if you just go online, you can see it right now. Somebody has created their own boogeyman to get the votes that they're looking for. And I think we need to really stop looking for boogeymen in South Carolina and start looking out for the people who are suffering the most in this state. So these social issues, I have no idea which one is going to be, but I won't be surprised when I start to hear about it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you're talking about the 2026 gubernatorial race. We haven't seen anyone declare yet, but again, everyone's kind of jostling in the background. I'm sure we'll see some announcements soon. But kind of flipping the script a little bit, Republicans have had a supermajority in the House for a while, 88 Republicans, 36 Democrats, and it's not all fighting. Y'all do actually vote together on some things. In fact, there's not even that much animosity. There's actually some collegiality at times. So when it comes down to these issues, when do do you decide to work together maybe, and when do you decide to fight? I mean, when is that dividing line? Where's that?
Well, the good thing about what we do in the General Assembly is that most things, I'd say a good 95% of the issues that come across our desk are bipartisan things. We come up with ways to really solve the issues. And if you've been looking at the LCI committee this year with our new chairman, Bill Herb Kirschman, if you see whenever we pass bills, he has all of us come stand up there at the well, and we stand together as a bipartisan unit saying, hey, this is good for business in South Carolina. This is not a Republican or a Democrat issue. This is just what's good for business and people in South Carolina. The only time you really see us getting at it and fighting is when it's a social issue, something that was created on Fox News, or something that was created on CNN, or something that was created out there by the White House, that just came up with something. So I think that is the main issue that we have, is just getting away from some of these social issues. Now, if I were the leader of this state, I would deal with those issues first. I would deal with the issues that really affect the most people in this state, and we'll save social issues for the end, because those are the things that affect 0.0001% of people in this state, and that's really just a talking point for dinner tables and during Thanksgiving and Christmas.
And when we talk about, working together, there's also internal fighting, not so much on the Democratic side, but more on the Republican side too, specifically in the House, where you have the far-right House Freedom Caucus. It's about 17 or 18 members, give or take, that really kind of jostle with the Republican leadership there. Again, there's 88 Republicans in the House chamber. But we did see some more issues this past couple of weeks with the Family Caucus, which spans both chambers there, and its leader, Greenwood Republican Representative John McCravey, who was on the record confirmed by House Majority Leader Davey Hyatt for making anti-Semitic and homophobic language. He was one of several Republicans in leadership that was targeted by outside groups such as Students for Life, which McCravey refused to denounce. So a lot of internal fighting going on over in the Republican Party. I'm assuming you guys can just kind of sit back and watch it, but did you have any takes after you heard some of these allegations and actually some of these confirmed statements come out?
Absolutely, and it's been extremely frustrating for me, because it just goes back to my DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion debate, and when I was up there talking at the well about it. It was, don't support me in private, support me in public. Don't come to me after the situation has been going forward. Denounce it in public. Tell everybody that this is wrong. You are supposed to be a leader of this state. And if you are a leader in the House, I don't care if you're Republican, a Democrat, or black or white, you do what is right. You are to stand up for what's right. And when people come out with these anti-Semitic rhetoric or racial rhetoric that they have been known to do, speak up about it. Make it known that you're not going to tolerate that type of hate and that type of rhetoric in this state. That this is a state that will welcome everybody, that we love everybody, that we will accept everybody, and we will do things under the rule of law. And I don't think that the Republican Party is really taking a stance on this. I think they talk about it in the back room. I think they talk about it amongst themselves. I think they talk about it with us, but I don't think that they get out there and publicly denounce this type of stuff, so that the vast majority of the 5.3 million people in the state can see that leaders will stand together on these things.
Yeah, we did see 29 Republicans leave the Family Caucus, but again, a lot of that was on the grounds of these outside groups targeting not necessarily the rhetoric that we heard coming out from their leader. We have about 3 minutes left, Representative Johnson. I want to ask you about just this major shift that we saw happen that affected Democrats and Republicans. That was in the budget, dealing with earmarks, money going back to folks' districts, whether it's for projects, infrastructure, or other initiatives with community groups, nonprofit groups. You spoke out against this multiple times this week too, a couple of amendments on the budget when it came back to the House before it went back to the Senate. So what was your issue with that there too? It sounds like they were trying to maybe put this money towards other needs in the state, but it sounded like you had some other opinions on that.
Yeah, I had a lot of other opinions. So I actually filed close to 60 amendments for the budget, and the amendments weren't to actually change anything in the budget. It was to highlight the programs that they were actually defunding in the state, that were actually doing the work. And I called out my colleagues in there. I said, listen, if you're the one who's going to do this cancer research, raise your hand and let me know. If you're the one who's out here serving these young people who are homeless, let me know. If you're the ones who are out here going to these schools and volunteering, let me know. But nobody is doing that work. We have organizations across the state that are receiving the state funds to do the work of the people. I mean, one of the organizations that I highlighted was about sickle cell. We know lots of people in this state are dealing with the sickle cell trait. Well, that organization will no longer get the funding. We have an organization here that deals with the Children's Trust, with abuse and neglect for children. Over 13,000 kids last year were victims of abuse and neglect. They are now not getting that funding to help solve that issue. Domestic violence in the state, they're not getting funding to solve that issue. And these are things that they're putting on the back burner. They're saying that the people in leadership are saying they're just not priorities for us. They're just not important enough for them to continue to get the funding to help solve these issues and eradicate these issues in this state. And that was the problem that I had. I wanted to shed some light on that to say, hey, listen, this is not pork. This is not an earmark. This is community investment. This is public investment, and this is good for the state of South Carolina.
That was Hopkins Democratic Representative Jermaine Johnson with me on This Week in South Carolina, which you can always catch Friday nights at 7:30 on SCETV and youtube.com/South Carolina ETV. Welcome to the wind down section, our little break from the news. We're glad you're here, along with lead podcast producer A.T. Shire. Hello, lead.
Hello, lead. Say hello, lead.
Hello, lead.
Thank you. Yes, I am here. I've made it. Gavin, we got no calls. I'm gonna straight off the top be honest with you. We got 2 texts. You want me to read the text to you? First one says, can you call back later?
Okay, I will.
Don't know what that's in reference to. And the second one says, sorry, I can't talk right now.
No, well, the call back later.
Yep.
No one calling to ask me about my uncollected tolls.
Yeah, I wish someone was messaging us about my car insurance and them needing my social security number, which I would understand.
And we'd give them.
I would understand. I would gladly give it. Gladly give it.
The lead does have a social security number.
Yeah, we are one of the only podcasts, take that, Joe Rogan, to get a social security number.
Well, the Supreme Court ruled podcasts are people's, so we do have to file taxes.
Well, they did rule in our favor. There is a higher court that is levying a ruling.
We opened a bunch of credit cards in the lead's name, and they have not been paid back.
No, but
the lead's credit is not great.
We have the scrolls on our side.
We're going to take advantage of all the things afforded to us, but we're not going to.
We would be dumb not to.
I'm not going to pay the taxes.
Stupid not to.
I'm not going to pay my debts. So thank you.
Anyway, Gavin,
yes.
I had a parenting experience this weekend, okay? I maybe told you about it a little bit.
Parenting with A.T.
I wanted to bring it to the people.
The people need to hear
and hear if I am an exception to a rule or something, or if this is just the way this goes.
I think it's an initiation almost.
Caitlin was working most of Saturday, right? So this was going to be a big time dad Rena day, okay?
Girl dad.
All my clothes say it now. No. So, listeners, I was entertaining the child as long as I could at home, okay? I was stretching.
You had to fill time. You couldn't spend it. You were tired of spending time with your own daughter?
It's more the other way around. It's more the other way around where you find that you cannot hold their attention. They get bored with you. Being in the same room, being in the same house, all that stuff, they want to go. So I'm like, okay, I'm sick of reading these same books every single night. We're going to go get some new books.
Okay.
We go, okay? We pick out some books. It's great. Driving home. I see tears rolling down my child's face in the rearview mirror.
She wants to go back to the bookstore.
But she isn't crying per se. She's not wah crying. I know. This is my father's intuition. She's doing a number 2. She's taking a poop, okay?
See something, you want to say something.
You do in this case, you do, okay? We get home. I'm like, all right, we're gonna handle this right away.
Yeah.
We bought 3 books. I go, here, Rena, hold this for me. When she's wiggling around and writhing, I go, hold this for me. And she normally settles down. I give her smaller, newest book, the smallest one.
Yeah.
I open the diaper. She immediately takes that book and slams it into
my God, Rena!
Soiled diaper. I'm so frustrated. I thought I was being a good dad up to this point. And now I paid for a book that I use for 90 seconds in my home.
And we can't salvage said book?
No, it is well soiled, I would say.
Tainted.
It is tainted.
I feel like those cardboard books, you just spray them down, but you're saying this one is...
that. Okay,
yeah.
So I can
I'm sure
attest,
it's easy, yeah.
I tried to do this. I tried to spray it down. It instantly became waterlogged. And so not only was it soiled, it was also waterlogged. I can't tell you the nadir of the fathering that I was at.
Panacea.
Yeah, it was terrible. I felt so stupid.
No.
And
I think that just comes to that. I mean, she's like, yeah, I'm done with this. Blop.
She had a ball. It was great, but paying $8.99 per diaper is
You're
a
like,
lot.
Rena, I'm a girl dad. Act like a girl. Be a little bit better, baby Rena.
I do have to say it's very funny sticking with Rena. I showed Gavin this. Gavin this video where Rena has said dada. She has said granddad. She has said Nana. She refuses to say Mama.
Oh.
And so when Caitlin leaves the space that we are in, Rena will go up to that space, shake the cage, and go, Caitlin! 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 It's hilarious. She's great.
So are you going to start calling Caitlin Mom?
I've been calling her Mom the whole time. I don't know why. Caitlin,
where she's getting it from.
Caitlin did attribute this all to me.
She been reading the mail?
She goes, you don't call me Mom enough. And I was like, I call her Mom all the time. I do it all the time. But apparently this is another failing of me as a father.
Well, we'll two to the board. It's funny when I see it. Like, it's one thing I get like to do as when the kid is a kid, and I don't think like my parents really did that. Well, you go ask your mom, but like when they're in the same space, it's weird. But it's odd when you get to the teenage years, and if you have friends, and I had like one friend whose parents would occasionally say, well, what's mother doing? And you're like, oh, just say their real name. Like we all have gotten past that point. Father.
Yeah, we know. Yeah.
Like,
but mother also.
Mother.
It's very psycho. You know what I mean?
That's the vibe you get after
Norman
a certain age.
Batesian.
After a certain age, you're going towards Norman Bates.
Yeah, and
which I mean,
mother.
Or a mother is a boy's best friend, as he said.
Oh yeah, well he's not wrong.
I wouldn't hurt a fly.
I do. I think you stepped on me a little bit. I did want to reference Danzig's
Psycho.
mother.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's pretty. Mother. Tell your children not to walk my way.
This is our Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah, that's what that song is about. Having a great Mother's Day with your mom.
They ever say mom? It's always mother in that song.
Mother. He said
the mothers out there.
Father. He does get there eventually. Yeah.
Even though this is a dad pod because my father gave me this podcast.
It's true, but somehow through
you gotta thank the moms out there.
Legal loopholes, Rena has wrested it away from Gavin.
Maritime law being what it is.
Yeah, a salty mistress. You know what I mean?
She's only one, but she knows the ins and outs of some complicated maritime law.
She is well versed in legalese. Anyway, Gavin, for today, you hold the sad mantle of host of this podcast, and with that, you must end the show.
She gets older, and she's like, well, it's my father's podcast now. I'm like, what? I'm like,
it was never your dad's podcast. It was my dad's, and now it's yours.
This is just like the Hatfields and the McCoys.
It's so similar.
It never changes.
Gavin, this is just like Yellowstone. I've never seen an episode. Anyway, Gavin, say goodbye, please.
Thank you all for, I guess not calling, which is what you can do at 803-563-7169. Give us some parenting moments like AT has shared. We'd love to hear if this is just happening to him. It could be. We'd love to hear some of your literary adventures with your children. 803-563-7169. You can always stay up to date with the latest news on scetv.org and southcarolinapublicradio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lede, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.
How long after that did it take him to get the Pest, his own vehicle?
Yeah, I don't know.
Ooh, Gustav.
But like...